From a flightless simulator at Ferris Air to a momentous meeting in an alley to the complex mind of an architect to every far sector in space and to the brilliance of the central power battery on Oa. This is the podcast that covers the adventures of all of your favorite ring slingers. This is the Emerald Echo with your hosts, Adam and the Emerald Enthusiast. And now, welcome to the Emerald Echo.
As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, the Emerald Enthusiast himself, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
What's up, everyone? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy. It is the Emerald Enthusiast, and we're back to talk a little journaling with Ellie, Shirley, and John Stewart. This is the Emerald Echo.
Before we get to the main topic, or the second half of the show, which is we're finally catching up and finishing our review and thoughts on Green Lantern War Journal. But as we always do when there's news about the Green Lantern mythology universe, however you want to phrase it, Donnie and I cover it. Before we get to the actual news, you have some personal news that is a milestone for your channel. So go ahead and share that news with the viewers and listeners.
Just very quickly here, my YouTube channel, and I don't mean this one, I mean the one that is entitled Emerald Enthusiast, where I do lots of Green Lantern product reviews, just hit 1,000 followers this week. And I'd like to thank everybody who listens to this show, who follows me on TikTok or Twitter or Facebook, everyone who watches my videos and who interacts with them, who promotes them on Reddit and other places. Thank you very much. From the bottom of my heart, it never ceases to amaze me the number of people who will message me and say, I really like that video and I'm going to buy a product or not buy a product because you recommended it that way. Or they message me and say, yeah, I liked your breakdown of a certain comic book. So thank you so much. It means a lot to this old man's heart.
Yeah, congratulations, and it's well deserved because you put a lot of work into your reviews in the thoughts you put into the way the style of review you give it, but also the presentation. So well deserved, and just a little background for maybe this is somebody's first episode of this show. The reason why. Or the way I came about to ask Donnie to be a co-host for this show and for the network is because I stumbled upon his YouTube channel where he was reviewing the action figures, and I thought, wow, this guy seems to know a lot about Green Lantern. He's got a good sounding voice, so maybe he'd make a good co-host for a Green Lantern show that I wanted to do, and I had to offer him the big bucks, of course, to get him to agree. But here we are. How many years have we been fooling around now, Donnie?
We have now been at this for 4 years.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're seeing this on YouTube, I just had my local comic shop came through for me. Got the new Green Lantern Corps Collector Edition. I have not seen these in any retail stores. Luckily, they came through for me.
Nice. Very nice. So it was because of that channel that Donnie and I linked up, and here we are, 4 years and counting. And
hey, a bonus for Adam because he had no idea that I was both a wrestling fan and a Maple Leafs fan. So
I get 2 podcasts out of it, and somebody that I could vent. Well, more than 2 because you've done more than just 2 shows, but and then somebody I could vent both the Leafs with, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. But 4 years running, and going into when we get into our 5th year, Donnie, we'll have a live action Green Lantern television series to review. Who would have thought that was going to be a thing when we first started? Certainly not me. I mean, the hope was there, but the plausibility was pie in the sky. But here we are, and that's what we have to look forward to. And by the time it comes out, will be year 5 for us.
Mhm.
And the reason why we know we have that show coming is because not only do they have James Gunn and Peter Safran overseeing the thing because they're the heads of DC Studios. Not only do we have Damon Lindelof and Tom King and the producer of Ozark, whose name escapes me, producing. Chris Bundy. Sorry, there you go. I remembered it. But now we have actors to go along with the creative people behind the scenes. We finally have official confirmation of both the actors playing Hal Jordan and John Stewart. So, first up, Hal Jordan will be played by Kyle Chandler, um, who is most well known for his role on Friday Night Lights, the football drama, to which I believe he won an Emmy for, or at the very least was nominated, but I think he won. But he's also been in the most recent Godzilla movie, or is it Kong? Which one?
He was in,
They've
and you know,
combined the two now, so
he
I'm
was in a
confused.
couple of he was in a couple of those because in a couple of those were Godzilla and King Kong,
Okay.
and that's how I know him. I know him from a couple of other comedic bit roles, but I am familiar with the actor.
Now, um, so we've established that he's won an Emmy.
Yes.
So they don't just hand those out to random people that appear on TV shows. Like, you have to have talent to win those kinds of awards. So Kyle Chandler has the talent to portray Hal Jordan. In terms of look, when I look at him, he's got the look of a Hal Jordan. So I'm on board with that. Again, I liked him in the parts in the bit or the. I haven't seen all of Friday Night Lights. I was kind of in and out. I watch. Some episodes I'd watch, then I'd miss a week or two or whatever. So it's not like I watched religiously like it was Smallville back in the day. But
Right.
I from the stuff I saw of him, I liked him in that. I like him in the Kong and Godzilla stuff that he's been in. So he's got the tools all baked in to be a really good Hal Jordan. Now, us being on the so before we get into the controversy, you notice the air quote for the people just listening, the air quotes I just did. Before we get into the controversy, on the basis of acting talent and look, Donnie, what do you think of the casting?
I'm like you. I think that the guy has a very long history of his craft, and he wasn't the first name that came to mind. And yes, most of my experience with him has been comedic roles, but from what I have read about him and from what I know him from, the King Kong and Godzilla movies, this is somebody who's very well established and who can play different types of roles very well. Now, Adam mentioned the controversy. I'll just give you my thoughts here on that. A lot of people are upset because he is in his, what was he, 59 or 58, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, hey, I'm with everybody who wants, if I could wave a magic wand and say both John and Hal are in their primes, yes, that's what I would want. However, their ages need to be whatever the story is. And I say this, and I can point this out from the comics. How old are John and Hal in the comics right now?
If we had to guess, mid-30s.
Okay.
There's no real.
And that's exactly what I was getting at. There is no real answer to that. Now, canonically, at one point, Hal was older than John. However, How old is Hal Jordan once he came back to life, was resurrected during Rebirth?
Yeah, who knows? They never
Okay,
said.
he looked a lot younger in Rebirth than he did at the first part of Volume 3. How old is John Stewart? John is much younger looking now than he was, 10 or 20 years ago. At one point, I would have said John is older than Hal based on the way they were being drawn at one point. But
Sure.
now they're both being drawn as late 20s, early 30s. They
Yeah.
both look young. So, and again, there's a lot of movie magic and screen magic that can be worked. If they want to make Kyle Chandler look like he's 45, I say they could do that very easily.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He doesn't look like your traditional. And I mean no disrespect when I say this. The way some people are talking, they make it look like he looks like Bernie Sanders. I mean, folks, he doesn't look like Bernie Sanders. He could pass for somebody that's in his 40s.
Yeah, he's a little on the older side, but he does not, by any means, does he look like a grandfather.
Yeah. Now, to your point, listen, if we all had what we wanted, would I like 20 years of live action stories covering Hal Jordan's whole career, covering John Stewart's whole career, covering the whole gamut of the Green Lantern mythos? Yes, I'd love that. But the reality is, we're never going to get that. That's never going to, in the pantheon of Hollywood, we're never going to get that. And, the evidence of that, of my thinking of that, is the Batman film franchise. Just look at it. Like, what, if you look at the sources used for adaptation of Batman, what has it been? We had Michael Keaton, who was already existing as Batman when we got him. So that was, and the source of inspiration for that was The Dark Knight Returns. That's been publicly said by producer Michael Uslan. So we got that, right? And then we got, and of course they spliced in the origin because the parents getting shot because that's what they did, right? And then we had 4 movies where he was somewhere in his 30s in those 4 movies. Then they went back to the origin again with Batman Begins and the Dark Knight trilogy. Basically wanted to cover Year One, The Dark Knight Returns, and a tiny little piece of No Man's Land.
Mm-hmm.
And now, so we had the Dark Knight trilogy, and now we have the Batman universe, which is Year Two. So the Batman film franchise has been going on since 1989, and we've got the same. It's inspired by the same 3, 4, 5 stories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, so as a Batman fan, would I like to see Year One all the way up through Batman Beyond? Yes. Is that realistically going to happen? No. And I understand that. The same thing is happening here with Green Lantern. We're not going to get, what's the first issue that Hal Jordan appeared?
Showcase number 22 in 1959.
Okay. So we're going to get that all the way through Volume 3 when Kyle Rayner was the Green Lantern in a consecutive storytelling span in live action. It's just never going to happen, folks.
Right. And obviously, there was no John Stewart in 1959. So this was obviously, playing from a couple of different stories.
We have to understand the idea that these are going to be adaptations. They're going to cherry pick aspects that they want, and it's not the comics. If you want that extremely long form 20 to 30 year storyline, go to the comics.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not going to get that in live action for any character, not just Green Lantern. So with that in mind, so again, I like the casting. Again, if you look at Kyle Chandler as an actor, I'll tell you what, because I've seen the comedies that Donnie, the comedic bits that Donnie mentions. I've seen Friday Night Lights. I've seen the Godzilla and Kong movies. In all those roles, Kyle Chandler never plays the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's never the same character. Contrast that with the actual actor we got for Hal Jordan back in 2011. I enjoyed the movie, flaws and all. I enjoy Ryan Reynolds as an actor. I love the Deadpool movies. But here's the thing about Ryan Reynolds. Chances are, when you're watching a Ryan Reynolds movie, it's pretty much the same performance all the time. It's Ryan Reynolds being version of Deadpool, basically. The degree of which depends on the rating of the movie.
Yeah.
And whether it's an actual Deadpool movie or not. But
He does have some different roles because I really like that guy.
Okay, but 99% of his roles are
Yeah.
like the performance is pretty much the same.
It's funny that it's a lot of comparisons are made between Deadpool and Green Lantern, and I mean the movie specifically.
Yeah.
If you watch Green Lantern, like if you had no idea who those two characters were, if you watch Green Lantern and then go and watch Deadpool, his performance as Deadpool is basically Green Lantern turned up to 11, like what he did with Hal Jordan.
Yeah, because that's I like Ryan Reynolds, but he has a limit to the range of his performance. So already on a performance level, I think Kyle Chandler has more potential layers to explore. And then look at the only other guy that we have official confirmation that was in the running for Hal Jordan, which is Josh Brolin. Again, Josh Brolin, I like a lot of his roles, but he plays the gritty, miserable, rough cowboy type, with the exception of Thanos, which is still miserable, gritty, rough, brutal guy instead of cowboy. But again, the roles are very much the same.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely would have been a different take. Josh Brolin can be funny if he needs to be, but I mean they bring very different energies to the screen.
So again, I think of the one person that we know was in contention, because we can't count rumors from Daniel RPK and all the scoopers who basically are 50-50 with their track records.
Mm-hmm.
The only other confirmed name that we had was Josh Brolin. I know we were never going to get Ryan Reynolds back, but throw him in the mix between Ryan Reynolds, Josh Brolin, and Kyle Chandler. To me, Kyle Chandler is the win. In terms of, give me those three, and which one am I choosing as Hal Jordan? It's Kyle Chandler.
Mm-hmm.
Hands down. So I'm on board with the choice. The age thing is just something that some fans are going to have to deal with, because we're not going to get that year one to end of career consecutive storyline for these characters. It's just not going to happen. And it never was. So we just got to deal with it.
Well, and let me, you mentioned Michael Keaton, and that gives me the opportunity to bring up a point here. I'm old enough to remember when Michael Keaton was cast as Batman. Okay. He was not my first choice. I had doubts about him, and I saw the movie, and the way they handled him, and they took the focus off of the fact that he's a small guy. They were able to hide that well, and at the same time, they still were able to bring out the physicality of Batman, and it was not a problem.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And so now I watch that, and I think Michael Keaton was a good choice. Let me give you another one here. I did not know who Denai Guerrero was before she was Michonne on The Walking Dead. Michonne was already my favorite character from the comics. The first time I saw Denai Guerrero, here was this very soft-spoken, very polite woman, and I'm like, does she have what it takes to be the hardcore loner who has the whole Walking Dead world figured out? Does she have what it takes? I saw her performance, and then later on saw her as Okoye, and now she's my favorite actress in all of Hollywood. So, absolutely do not look at somebody and think that you know how they're going to be before you see them in that role, because they may bring things out of their abilities that you have not seen before.
And here's another one. This is a real popular one. Turned out to be a real popular one. Heath Ledger is the Joker.
Another good choice. Yeah, another good example.
I was unsure when they cast that one, but dude won an Oscar.
Mm-hmm. and delivered one of the greatest performances in any comic book movie.
I'd argue that both Jokers since have been trying to live up to that.
Mm-hmm.
One famously failed. The other one is, I call him pretend Joker, or I just call him Clown because it's not the Joker. But I digress. That's a whole different episode.
Yeah, that's
But
the whole.
the
let's
point
not
is,
open that can. That's
the
that's a
point
whole
is,
other can of worms.
the point is, Heath Ledger, the entire internet, like went into the fetal position and started crying when he was
Mhm.
cast, and then he won an Oscar. So can we relax? And if literally your only hang-up is the age thing, I got one sentence for you: get over it, because you have no other choice. It's either get over it and try and enjoy the show, or don't watch the show. It's up to you. Now, of course, Hal Jordan is in it, but we know that he's not the only Green Lantern. He will be accompanied by John Stewart. And we
Mhm.
also have our John Stewart casting. And John Stewart will be played by Aaron Pierre.
Mhm.
Aaron Pierre is most recently being seen on Rebel Ridge. It's a Netflix film. It's seemingly popular because it was number one for a number of weeks on Netflix. Um, I watched it. I quite enjoyed it. Uh, Aaron Pierre gives a great performance. But I also knew Aaron Pierre, but this is not Aaron Pierre's first foray into the DC universe. He was Deb M, I think was his name, on the short-lived 2-season series Krypton that was on Sci-Fi a few years ago.
Mhm.
Um, and I liked him on that. I liked him in Rebel Ridge. I look at him and I'm like, yeah, I see John Stewart there.
Mhm.
I think it's fantastic casting. I think it's about time that John Stewart got into live action, because for the people that grew up on the Justice League animated series, to them, John Stewart is Green Lantern.
Mhm.
Like, if all they know is the Green Lantern animated series and they don't read the comics, to them, Green Lantern is John Stewart. So I think John Stewart getting the spotlight here is a smart move. Because I can remember back in 2011 when the promotion for Green Lantern, the movie, started. And I remember hearing people in casual conversations, I thought he was black.
Sure, and I
So,
remember those.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a smart move. So I like the actor. Donnie, do you have any thoughts on just Aaron Pierre as John Stewart before we get to another controversy and an even stupider one? But go ahead. First,
I will say this. I haven't watched Krypton. I did watch a couple of episodes. I don't remember him in that. It's one of those things I'm going to go back and watch it someday.
it was
I
good.
know Aaron Pierre from the movie Old, which was a
Oh,
great movie, was a
yes.
lot of fun, even though it was very creepy. And he played the character mid-sized sedan in that. And what he did with that role, it was a very dramatic role, and I really liked what he did in that movie. And as soon as the casting hit, and I was like, yeah, I remember him from Old, and I think he can do this. So I'm excited about that part as well.
Well, Donnie, I mentioned the controversy, and I'm glad you're sitting down because you're ready for this one.
Yeah.
We've talked about some stupid stuff in terms of fan reaction on this show over the course of 3.5 years, 4 years. I think this may be the stupidest. Right here it is. Segments of Twitter have been complaining that Aaron Pierre is, and I quote, not dark enough to play John Stewart. What is so stupid we arrive to in society where this is a complete. Seriously,
Yeah.
really? Are we grasping at straws now just to complain for the sake of complaining? Is that what this is?
Yeah,
It's stupid.
look at the core of John Stewart, and we know that when John Stewart debuted, part of it was the essence of his character was that he was a black man in America dealing with the racism of the time.
Hmm.
There's absolutely no reason that if they want to touch on that in the modern day context, they can still do that
Hmm.
with Aaron Pierre. And to rule somebody out because of that, I mean, I look at Aaron Pierre. I mean, I don't look at him and think anything other than this man looks like an African American person. So I don't know. And again, I know that comic book fans like to we want as close to the comics as possible, and I don't fault anybody for that. But at the same time, I mean, when I saw some people focusing on that, I'm like, again, and like I said, I'm not going to try to invalidate anyone else's experience because I realize that there are things that I may not understand about the experience of people of color. But as a Green Lantern fan, as a John Stewart fan, I look at this and like that never even entered my mind that he's not as dark as some people want him to be. So
I just don't get it. I think
he
I think
looks
it's
a lot like John Stewart is currently being drawn in War
yeah.
Journal that we're getting ready to talk about.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's why I find it completely asinine. Like, listen, had they cast Charlie Sheen as John Stewart, then you got a complaint,
Mm-hmm.
a valid one. But this is ridiculous. And the reason I get so frustrated with it is because I know the segment of people that are who I can tell by the accounts of the particular people that are complaining, they're a particular type of fan base of a particular director and a particular vision for the DC universe. This is why it bothers me because I know where the stupidity is coming from,
Yeah.
and so it's nonsense.
And there are some fans out there, and they will feign outrage about whether it's this guy's skin tone or whatever else, or something that someone else who's connected with the movie may have done in their personal life or something like that.
Yeah,
And it's really not about that. It's about the fact that they want Zack Snyder,
yeah,
and that's
and
all
that's
they want is Zack
exactly,
Snyder.
exactly. And here's the thing: at the end of the day, here's why I'm confident because both actors tested for the role. They tested with each other. You know, also once Kyle Chandler was selected, he tested with both candidates for John Stewart. So they have chemistry tests to prove that this is the right pairing. It wasn't like Kyle Chandler walked in the door and James Gunn said, hey, random thought. You want to play Hal Jordan? And then it's not like Aaron Pierre walked in the door and said, just offer, here's the contract. Want to play John Stewart? Like they had to earn their roles.
Well, and let me just say this: any actor who wants to audition for this type of role has got to be somebody who has some intestinal fortitude,
Yeah. They have to want it.
because
They have to want
you're
the role.
talking about one of the first African American titular black superheroes, and that comes with a lot of pressure. So the fact that he was willing to step up and just audition at all means this guy's got confidence in his ability.
And I'm sure he knows the significance of that.
Right. Like I can't imagine, like, Chadwick Boseman. I mean, to step on screen to play Marvel's first
Yeah,
titular black superhero, what it would take and the pressure that would come with that came with that.
of course.
And look at what he gave to the world. Well, Aaron Pierre, give the guy a shot and see what he can do.
Yeah, and to me, at the end of the day, they've gotten two quality actors to portray these two characters. And as a fan, that's all I can ask for. Is that they bring top quality people
Mm-hmm.
in all facets of the production. And so far, especially with Lanterns, that's exactly what they've done. So all I can do as a fan now, and I know you're in this boat as well. So Green Lantern's coming. This is not a what if anymore. This is not a daydream. It's not a pie in the sky theory. Like, it's happening, and I think it's time to get into excited, because behind the camera we got a ton of talent, and in front of the camera so far we've got a ton of talent. So let's get excited as Green Lantern fans. You want more Green Lantern live action content? Give this one a shot. Support it, at least at first.
With every piece of information that comes out, all I can think of is the mainstream talking about Green Lantern, as in the mythos. Little kids dressing up at Halloween, little kids from all walks of life, whether they want to be Hal Jordan or John Stewart or one of the many aliens that I hope we get on the show.
Yeah,
that they can be Green Lantern, and not to mention all the action figures that I hope will be out in the stores.
Yeah, well, there's going to be McFarlane will be all over that come next year, I'm sure, or 2026, I should say, because it starts filming supposedly, or the target is January to start filming, so it's probably looking at a 2026 release, give or take. But from our end, there's lots of reasons to be excited. There'll probably be more casting to be had, so Donnie and I will cover that as it comes down throughout the remainder of the year. And so stay tuned. Lanterns on HBO is coming, and we've got our Hal Jordan and John Stewart. Mm-hmm. So the train keeps moving, and we're going to keep this episode moving, because right after the break, we're going to talk comics, specifically Green Lantern War Journal. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Don't go anywhere. And we're back.
Indeed we are. And we are going to talk about Green Lantern War Journal, specifically the second half of the story, which is issues 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. That's where we left off pre-interview cycle.
Yes. So if you're wondering why we're catching up on all of these, it's because we had people like Tim Sheridan and Daryl Banks and Ron Mars and Jeremy Adams. All of those people donated their time to us for this podcast. We want to thank them, and we hope that you will watch all of those episodes and listen to the creators who bring to life our favorite ring slingers.
Yeah. So we're a little behind, but I always enjoyed a good binge read in my time, and I got to do that over the last couple of nights for issues 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. And I had a blast. So now we're going to talk about it. So Donnie, kick us off here.
Well, we're going to talk about issue number 6, and we are going to go through these fairly quickly to catch you up. We're going to talk about a few different points here. Issue 6, the Radiant Dead, led by the Revenant Queen, are attacking. And one of the Radiant Dead is actually Varan. And if you remember, Varan showed up the very first issue. Varan, who is a Durlan, is once again confronting John Stewart. Now, John, again, is obviously too powerful for Varan here. But Varan, as a Durlan, actually has the ability to shapeshift. And even though he is kind of a light zombie now, which, remember, when we had Phillip Kennedy Johnson on the show, the infection is an infection that spreads through light. And Varan is able to reshape himself as John's abusive father, and also taunt John about his mother. And John forms this massive gun and blows him away, just incinerates him. And that was one of my favorite lines, by the way. He was like, "Don't talk about my mother."
Yeah.
I like that. I like how much we see, and that's actually a really important point that I'll make later on about how much John, how much affection he has for his mother. Varen's not dead, by the way. He does show back up. But what were your thoughts on some of the early panels in this issue?
Well, I thought first of all, just the idea that Varen could shapeshift into John's father presents a a striking, visual but also emotional scenario for John, right?
Yeah,
Because uh, given what we learn about his father and through John's mother's sort of inner dialogue or not exposition, if you will, I guess is the better word. But what like I said, what got me was the fact that just John's reaction, where he constructs that gun and that big gun and this blows him to smithereens, and what it is. It all comes down to what really gets me and hooks me on that moment is John expressing his love and connection for his mother.
hmm
That is such a relatable thing. It's like, someone could say whatever they want about me. Just, you better not insult my mother because then we're gonna have problems. You know, call me whatever you want under the sun, but leave her out of it. And so that's a philosophy that I have. So it's a very relatable thing, and whether you have a Green Lantern ring or not. And so it strikes a chord, and John is just doing what I think everybody in those situations wish they could do is
right.
construct a weapon and beat the crap, or either beat the crap out of the guy or worse. So yeah, that it was fun. It was great to see, and after all the emotional stuff that had been building for the first 5 issues, there was a bit of a release in that, and I think of the emotional tension. I thought it was well executed by Montos, the artist. So
Yeah, I really like the art, and I'll say this, and I mean we'll give our rating at the end. There's a lot of horror type of art in these issues,
sure,
obviously with the Radiant Dead and the Revenant Queen, and it's drawn very skillfully. And Philip Kennedy Johnson is somebody who knows how to write horror. If you read his Hulk or you're reading his Hulk run, he
yes.
has that same type of theme, the horror themes in that.
Mm.
Um, but it's drawn very well, and when it needs to be creepy, it's definitely creepy. So back to the narrative. So the United Planet Lanterns, who, by the way, are not trained properly, these are not the Green Lanterns that we know. They're getting absolutely curb stomped by the Radiant Dead.
Yeah.
And Shepard, who, remember, he's from another world, he gets a little overconfident. He thinks that this battle is going to be it's going to be won. He has a memory of John Stewart winning a battle, and he loses his concentration. And when he does, he gets gored by the Revenant Queen, in a very horrific looking image.
Yeah, very gruesome.
Yeah, and 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 it's funny. John goes to heal him with the power that he has. And in a lot of ways, what John is doing is kind of a mirror image of what we see with the Revenant Queen, because the infection is being spread by light. What John Stewart does here is actually heal with light.
Mm.
Can he change just enough of Shepard to heal him from the wound and the infection there that comes with that wound?
Mm.
And so I like that we see kind of the dark side of the light and the light side of the light. So also we learned
It,
that, go ahead,
it,
because there's
it's
one
it,
revelation here.
I think it's fascinating just how powerful John is in this situation. Like it shows you how powerful he is, and also it differentiates him from every other human Green Lantern in that way.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it just speaks to the beauty of having so many Green Lanterns, human Green Lanterns, I should say, is that they're all unique in their own way. And I think that's just the beauty of it. So John having these powers and being able to do these things is makes him unique among, again, people say, well, how come there are so many human lanterns? Well, they're all different, they're all unique, they're all special, they all have their own skill, unique skill to bring to the table, right?
Well, if you've ever had that question, read Jeremy Adams' run.
Yes.
And then read Civil Core, because there's a lot that ties into those two, and you get an answer as to why there's so many human Green Lanterns. But that's not what we're talking about today.
And so, with just to be clear, with the Revenant virus, you can in fact inject light into it, and in this case, it would heal you. Not the same with what somebody was saying in 2016 about injecting light and bleach and things. Totally different. But I for whatever reason, when I reread that, I just paused, laughed, and moved on. But go, continue.
Yeah. And I wish that I could say that was the end of the stupid things that were being said by that individual, but definitely not. Anyway,
No.
but back to the narrative. So we learned that the Revenant Queen is actually, I think it's Anjna actually, but anyway, she is the daughter.
Guy, so.
Yeah, she is the daughter of Olgren. Now, she's not specifically the daughter. She is kind of the memory of the daughter of Olgren. Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to say, I don't know who Olgren is and I don't know who she is, well, there's a reason for that. These aren't Green Lantern characters. And I saw the instant reaction from some veteran Green Lantern readers. They're like, wait a minute, how is this the payoff? Because these aren't characters from Green Lantern. If you don't know where they're from, they're actually from Phillip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics run.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
Definitely read it, yeah.
So anyway, at this point, and so we get that revelation that she is at least the memory, like the manifested memory of Olgren.
Yeah.
And so the issue comes to an end shortly thereafter. So what were your thoughts here?
For me, it was fun because I had read, of course, Phillip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics run. So I was well apprised of what was going on. I knew who everybody was. And the payoff was there for me, again, because in long term I had been reading Action Comics. Also, the fact that she's a manifestation of the daughter, right?
Right.
Kind of mirrors what's happening with what is it, Ellie?
Yes, it's Ellie. Ellie is the like
construct.
Yeah, the construct, the part of John Stewart that he imbued to protect his mother, Shirley.
But it's interesting how they're both kind of manifestations of a daughter.
Yeah, well, we see that. We see kind of a lot of mirror images taking place, the light side and the dark side in these.
That's what was cool for me when, reading that, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This is kind of a parallel situation happening here. I really dug that.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, again, Ajna is the memory, the formation of Olgren's memories, and they are from the first world. And if you'd like to read more on that, go read Phillip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics run. So there's no reason you can't do that. And yes, I would have preferred somebody like Moraine or Fatality to come back into play, but I wasn't so disappointed that I looked at this and felt like I was cheated in any way. Again, I learned more about these characters, and I understand why Phillip Kennedy Johnson wants to play in his own sandbox. He's utilizing what he's written before.
And I also think it's interesting that some characters are important enough, are formidable enough to be threats to other characters in the DC universe other than Superman or other than Green Lantern.
Yeah.
So that to quote wrestling terminology, that puts the villain over as a big time heel, right? So
Right.
when Superman by himself can't deal with you, and we need John Stewart or the Green Lanterns to come in and do some run-ins, right? As it were. It just strengthens the villain. So yeah, I don't mind it at all.
Yeah. And I should say the issue does end with John and the Revenant Queen vanishing, and we see where they end up in the next issue. But
Right.
it's funny that you mentioned wrestling, because once again, that was also on my mind. It kind of reminded me of like when wrestlers talk about like a previous feud they may have had in another organization,
Yeah.
and they reference that, and they're like, we've met before, we had issues before, and it may have been somewhere else that they can't talk too much about, but
Yeah.
you realize there's this whole story that was there before.
Well, John
And
has
so
no clue what the hell's going on. She's talking
yeah,
about I met
exactly.
you. He's like, I don't know who the hell you are. I don't know who you are.
So, but anyway, so that's where we are, and that leads into issue number 7. And again, John has been transported somewhere. He ends up in another universe that his ring cannot identify.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere, obviously out of the sectors that the ring would be able to, any Green Lantern ring would be able to identify.
Right.
So if you remember from the previous issues, we did see a symbol and a some kind of phenomenon in the sky, and that is the Dark Star of the Fen. And we see that it's kind of it's an opening to like some kind of horrific nightmare universe, and it's contained barely by this gravitational field that is around it. And that is the work of a character named Bilavak. And that's a character that shows up in this issue for the first time as far as Green Lantern is concerned. So what were some of your early thoughts there, Adam?
I thought it was fascinating in the sense that we're going into this other universe, and there's this kind of nightmarish pocket universe or void or I don't know how you want to describe it, but it was just I'm like, I like how sci-fi this is.
Yeah.
Like this is reminding me of part of the reason why I sort of gravitated towards Green Lantern in the first place. When I've always thought, as I've read more Green Lantern over the years, what I've come to sort of see for myself, and this issue kind of echoes that. You've got elements of Superman and the superhero aesthetic, obviously, but you also have elements of Star Wars and Star Trek. I mean, it's got the best of the three worlds baked into it, and this what we're seeing here is evidence of that. Like this is very Star Trek, Star Warsy kind of stuff we're dealing with here, and I dig it.
And so, going back to talk about, the TV series, there are so many things. Green Lantern can encompass many different types of stories, whether you want to have an Earth story about, two partners getting along as, some kind of cops, or,
which seems like season 1 would be probably,
or whether, if you want to have a story about racial injustice, you can have that. At the same time, if you want to have lanterns dropped in the middle of this massive interstellar war, you can have that as well.
Yeah.
It's a multifaceted mythos.
Right, agreed. And this issue is definitely proof of that.
So I will say too, if you don't know, if it's a little confusing to you with John being dropped in this other world, Bilavak serves as a narrator. He imparts a lot of information to John. He kind of serves as the exposition of this is what's going on. And by the way, there are all these, there are these scientists who have where John is in this other universe, and they're preparing for war against the Dark Star. And he tells you exactly what's going on.
Yeah. There is a lot. There is a lot happening.
It is a lot, and it's very deep.
Yeah. It's not fluff that you can just say, hey, that was fun, and throw it away. And that's the one thing about Phillip Kennedy Johnson. He's very detailed. He's very thorough. There's a lot of meat on the bone. It's not just, man, took me 5 minutes to read this and I'm done, and yeah, it was good,
Yeah.
and that's it. You walk away from it. It does leave you thinking, leave you questioning, but this kind of stuff is intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Now, and remember, the narrative switches back and forth in these stories, mainly between what's going on with John out in space and what is going on back on Earth with Ellie and Shirley. And we see, again, Varen is not dead. He shows up on Earth, and this time his target is Shirley Stewart. He wants to attack her directly.
Yeah. And we see that. He's having fun with the visage of John's father, I'll tell you that much.
Mm-hmm.
She's using that to the fullest extent of its possibility, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm. So let's go into issue number 8 now. And we find John battling these light monsters from the Dark Star, and they identify themselves as the children of Olgren's Mine.
Yeah.
And again, the art in this it's really detailed, and there's a lot of really massive fight scenes that don't involve, and there are plenty of human and humanoid characters, but there are a lot of monsters that have to be difficult to draw.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's these, and these aren't exactly like what the Radiant Dead are, even though they look similar, but it's if you like horror type stories and you look at this has to be very satisfying.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Now, and I have to talk about my favorite panel. Go ahead and with what you want to say, sir.
It's just a combination of sci-fi and horror in this imagery, and it's like when you say that out loud or you think about it, those two things technically shouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think about horror, I think of a certain type of entertainment, right? When I think about sci-fi, I think of another type of entertainment. It's not often that I imagine those two together, but here we are getting that, and it works.
Mm-hmm. And I have to point out my favorite panel in this is John making this massive giant armor construct.
Mm.
And he has the shield with the Green Lantern on it. And the thing is to combat this, army of monsters that's coming through. So the thing is massive. And all I have to say is, Tony Stark, eat your heart out, because John Stewart makes in a second what Tony Stark, what it might take him weeks or months to make. That's why I love Green Lantern so much, is you always get different responses to different types of situations. They don't have just a very set of superpowers. They can do literally anything, and this is said in that series many times. There are no limits to what a Green Lantern can do, and especially John Stewart here. And like I said, I just love that panel. I would love to have that as like a poster or something, signed by Phillip Kennedy Johnson. But
the art is just it's extraordinary, and it just fits perfectly with the story that Phillip Kennedy Johnson is telling here. Like we've talked about that with many creators that have come on, and the sort of harmony that has to exist or form with the writer and the artist, and it seems like these two were certainly in sync.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of different things that are going on back on Earth. Number one is that we see that Shepard shows up on Earth trying to find Guy Gardner. He goes to Guy's apartment, and this was one of the funniest things. We still don't know what's going on with the Guardians. Okay, that's the biggest thing. And by the way, I will say this. I think there's an old adage that goes, before you solve a problem with a hero, you make two more for them. I think both Phil Kennedy Johnson and Jeremy Adams have been going kind of by that template when it comes to yeah. So we get one answer, but before we get that, we'll get two more questions. So we don't know where the Guardians are, And we don't know how Guy comes to have the Book of Oa. My guess is when things started to go down between Theros and the Guardians, or whoever, Guy realized this is something that's too important to fall into the wrong hand, so I'm going to take it. Now, I don't know that for sure. Again, I'm kind of reading between the lines at this point.
Guess. Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
But
also, where he keeps it is the funny part.
He's hiding it in his closet, the back of his closet, underneath a bunch of what seems like dirty socks and underwear. And I love the reaction of Shepard when he's got one of the something that's dirt. I hope it's socks and not underwear, but regardless, he has it, and the look on his face is absolute revulsion. He's like,
yeah, he's so disturbed.
Guy doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who does laundry on a regular basis. It's kind of, he'll get around to it eventually.
He just drops stuff on the floor until he's ready.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, the fact that he's keeping an artifact of such import in the very back of his closet. Like, think of what people keep in the back of their closets. Usually, if you go into a teenager's room, we're going to find some inappropriate magazines in the back of his closet. And here's Guy. He's just got the Book of Oa.
He's got the Book of Oa, and I guess some of the stuff surrounding the Book of Oa, I guess it could have been worse. But anyway, think about that too. If Guy goes away for long periods of time and he's battling, monsters all over the universe or whatever, he probably hasn't done laundry in a while. So if he has dirty sweat socks in his closet, they're gonna stay dirty.
Yeah, Shepard is not in an envious position.
So we see that Ellie still has Shirley in this illusion. She has her in this house. Remember, John created Ellie to protect his mother, and also to make her final days pleasant. Remember, John's mother is dying. She has dementia.
Yeah,
and we also see in these issues that Steele and Natasha Irons, they're showing up trying to continue with her medical care, and Ellie's not on the same page. Ellie definitely has her own mind about how she's going to protect Shirley Stewart. So there's a little bit of tension there. And again, Varen shows up, and he proceeds to terrify her. And I really like in these issues that whenever you see Varen showing up, the panels and the backgrounds get very chaotic, and you see Shirley's hair in those, it's usually gray. When she's with Ellie, it's black. Her hair's black. She's younger, she's more vibrant, she's happy, but she's more terrorized, obviously, around Varen.
It's almost like we're seeing the disruption that Varen causes to the illusion, to the fantasy, right? And so I actually really love that there's a distinction between the two scenarios. That's incredible attention to detail.
And we also see one of my favorite images here is that.
Go ahead. I think that's also a very. If you think of it on a deeper level, it kind of is a sort of stark look at sort of the effects of dementia, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the person who, let's say, is having a moment where they think they're 20 years in the past, or remembering things 20 years in the past, and things may be great in that moment for that person that's struggling. To their family member who is in the present and watching them actually deteriorate, it is the complete opposite experience. Mm-hmm. I can say that from experience watching my grandmother go through dementia. So to see that that experience on both sides of the coin manifested in the art was quite striking. and very, very relatable.
Yeah. And it comes into play too later on. Let me say this: somebody with dementia can be very clear on who they are, especially like who they were in like the prime of their life.
Yeah.
And then the next minute they can be very confused.
Yeah.
And that comes into play later on here. I don't want to say too much at this point, but I will say that I think my favorite image from this is that when Ellie detects Varen outside, she makes this unit of soldiers around the house to protect the perimeter. And that's why I think, Philip Kennedy Johnson, that's something I think specific that he brings to this as a writer, being a soldier. And I'm going to assume, like, I look at this and it looks very authentic, even though they're constructs. Obviously, they're not actually soldiers,
Right.
but the detail and the way they're lined up, I'm like, I can tell this is somebody, even if I didn't know who PKJ was. By the way, we interviewed him here. Just again,
Couple times.
go back and watch those episodes. It seemed like somebody who really knows what they're doing, and I really like that image of that. That's where Ellie went, because that's where John Stewart would go.
Yeah. Well, she's a part of him after all. So
yeah, exactly. So that's it makes sense that that's where her mind would go to protect Shirley in this situation.
I think if you or I were creating constructs, it'd be a Royal Rumble of pro wrestlers.
If I was making construct, I mean, to me, it would be all Green Lanterns. I'd be like construct Green Lanterns. I'm like,
if I was making constructs, I wouldn't be fighting a war, and it would be all my multiverse wives. But that's just me. But anyway,
that's a whole different podcast. Anyway,
it might not be appropriate for kids, so let's just move on.
I was going to say let's keep it PG-13 now. So. So on to issue number 9, and I want to show this. If you're listening on another platform, you won't be able to see this, but if you're on YouTube, I really love the cover here.
That was fantastic.
Even though Varen at this point is starting to not look like this anymore, just there's a lot of story in this cover. So
the detail is insane.
Yeah. So we see here that actually Shepard, again, in Guy Gardner's apartment, he is looking for information on the Revenant Queen and the Radiant Dead, and he's trying to figure out, how do they fight this threat? And we do get a backstory, and the story is entitled Myth and Legend, and we do get some of the backstory again on those, those first gods here.
Right.
And Anjna and Olgrin, and about how they came to be in the situation that they're in.
Absolutely. I think one of my big takeaways from all this is sort of the origin story of these characters is Phillip Kennedy Johnson loves to world build, and I think he's great at it. Just the detail and all that goes into it is like we're told we see all of the story play out. Like nothing is spared, right? So it's not just a montage, just one quick page of a montage. It's hefty. And you're getting full meal from this with this story.
Yeah. And so, not as Shepard is reading this, we see that there was an earlier version of the Dark Stars than the one that we knew that John Stewart used to be in, the Dark Stars, from the 90s comic. And we also see, and this was a really interesting choice, one of the things when the narrative cuts back to Earth, there's a panel that says too powerful to control, and they're talking before about that light energy that we were dealing with those gods. But this is Ellie with this kind of fiendish grin. And so I think, Phil Kennedy Johnson plays with this idea throughout the issues that maybe Ellie is a character that might break away from John's control, and what will she do when she does that? Is she a specifically good character, or
Yeah,
is something going to happen with Ellie? And so I don't think you know, and I think he kind of plants the seeds here.
yeah, that's actually very astute. Yeah, good observation there.
Yeah. And so this is the issue when she does go outside of the construct and she confronts Varen directly. And at this point, we see that Varen continues through these issues to change. And at this point, he's becoming more and more monstrous.
Mm. Yeah,
And we actually see that he starts calling himself by another name eventually.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the fact that he gets more monstrous looking, I think, is very interesting because the more he loses that humanoid appearance, he becomes more foreign, more uncontrollable,
Mm-hmm.
and the more he attacks John's mother, again, the more to me it goes beyond the confines of the pages, and it's kind of like a commentary on the disease that is dementia, because it gets to a point where it's beyond your control.
Yes.
It, it's not anything tangible that you can fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's out of your control. So I think the fact that we have this villain transforming into something that is unrecognizable to human conception, I think that's very again. Phillip Kennedy Johnson and Montos haven't told me this, but I thought when I go just watching that unfold, I'm like, is this by design? Is this some sort of extra commentary on on how people process dealing with dementia?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Again, maybe it's because I was initially reading this, during my grandmother's struggle with it before she passed. So maybe it has extra meaning for me, but that's just what I kind of
Mm-hmm.
took from it.
Well, and thank you for sharing that with us. Yes, I've had some family members struggle with this too, and it's difficult
not pleasant.
to see this happen. But I will
Yeah.
say this too: there's an element of realism in this,
Right. Yeah.
and
Oh, for sure.
you and I talked about on some of the previous podcasts that we like the fact that Phillip Kennedy Johnson is dealing with this when it comes to relationships and not automatically jumping to the romantic relationship, giving John a love interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he's dealing with someone he loves, and it's a parent.
Yeah. It was nice to have the parent child relationship explored in a way that was like obviously you don't get that. Bruce Wayne doesn't get that because his parents are deceased.
Mm-hmm.
The only other, I think the only other time where we get to spend a lot of time on the parent-child relationship was probably Clark with the Kents, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
when you see that, and now Clark with John and all the kids he brought back from the two twins he brought back from Phillip Kennedy Johnson's run from Warworld, their Apocalypse. And so, like, but we don't really get this type of story typically in the superhero realm. It's usually, let's say Green Lantern. John Stewart would be given a love interest, or Carol and Hal, or Bruce and Selena, and so it's a refreshing change.
Mm-hmm. And so we learn in this issue that the gravity field that's around the gravity wall that is around the Dark Star is the work of Biolovac. But that, it's failing and there's about to be a war and the Dark Star is going to contaminate this entire universe. And so to combat this, John Stewart does a very Green Lantern thing by flying straight at the Dark Star and saying, I'm going to take care of this because I'm a Green Lantern, and a Green Lantern can do anything.
Yeah.
And this is against the advice of by Levak, by the way. One of the most important panels as John is flying into this incredibly dangerous battle, you see the image of John thinking about his mother, or perhaps he's made this construct of her face in front of him. And I think that is one of the most important panels here because we're about to see what really made John Stewart the man that he is. And it's not going to be maybe the things that we thought about John Stewart previously. When we thought about John Stewart, where does his strength come from? Where does his will come from? I think we've seen Philip Kennedy Johnson make a very intriguing and a very profound development with John Stewart.
Yeah, that image was beautiful, and just like it was so detailed. You got to live just in that image, even with no dialogue. You got to live key moments of his mother's history, for her backstory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it helps that um, um, it helps that what she was fighting against and fighting for are and were real life uh, experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that. But yeah, it's amazing how in one image you can get so much backstory and details of the character's life.
Well, so now we're going to jump to issue number 10, and I really like the way that this one starts out. So Shepard is trying to get back to John Stewart with the information that he has, and he is confronted at the quarantine line by the United Planet Lanterns. And there are so many of them, they overwhelm him. He can't possibly fight them all off. At the same time, John Stewart is flying towards a similar battle. It's a being that he presumably can't possibly beat. And we see that here as he's flying towards the Dark Star.
Yeah.
So once he's there, John is kind of trapped in this type of like a fantasy world. And you talked about that earlier. This doesn't usually look like what a Green Lantern comic looks like because he's kind of living back in time. He's living Olgren's experience.
Right.
When he was alive having his daughter Ajna. And I really let you know, John is enjoying this. You can tell that he's enjoying this because he's experiencing Olgren's emotions. But at the same time, he starts to like break away a little bit and realize that this is not real. And one of the ways you see that is that Ajna's face kind of turns into the Revenant Queen.
Yeah.
It gets kind of ugly and like a skull and purplish. And so, he's fighting against this. John is in the middle of this thing, and he is trying to learn about it. Remember early on in this series, we talked about John learning how to build things from the inside out.
Yes.
What he's learning here is he's trying to learn about the enemy that he's confronting.
Yeah, it's almost like it's John Stewart's equivalent of Batman's prep time. Is what it is. But I really liked in terms of just the switch up of art style here.
Yeah.
It does.
Oh, man.
Feel, that flashback stuff. Those memories. It felt very Lord of the Rings esque. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then, like you said, when she starts turning into this skull-like monster, it instantly shifts back to the horror, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just to have the artistic talent to do that, to do one style, let alone be able to switch it up like that, just gets all the props in the world for me because, as I've said many times, I can't draw stick figures. So
Well, and that style changes again as the narrative comes back to Earth here, and we're back with Shirley Stewart again being tormented as Varen, who has the face of John Stewart's father and Shirley's ex-husband. And there's one panel that he looks just horrific. He has a venom-like tongue
Mm,
and these massive teeth. And what's really cool about these panels is again as Shirley runs, as she comes out of the pleasant illusion that she's in, her hair, you can see her throughout this, her hair gets more and more gray.
yeah,
And so, like I said, I really like that touch in this.
I
Now,
agree.
Steele and Natasha show up to try to help Ellie deal with Varen. Again, Star Shroud, but again, they're overmatched here. And something very important here happens is that she gets bitten by Varen. And so presumably now the infection is going to take hold. The
Mhm.
light infection that we talked about.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that? Again, some
Uh,
very horrific scenes.
I was wondering, was the my thought process was, is this something that John's gonna have to watch progress over the next few issues? Like, because he's already been through the ringer in terms of watching her decline already. Are we gonna now add to that struggle? So that was my concern. I mean, it would have been gut wrenching, but from a story perspective, if that had happened. So I'm kind of glad that that wasn't the road they went, even though it would. I mean, you could see how that could be a possibility, but yeah, it was what I found very important was that you kind of had to have John Henry Irons and what is it, that and Natalie and Natasha. What's the what Steele's
John
in the
Henry
comics?
Irons,
Yeah, her niece.
his knee. Oh,
It's
Natasha,
his, yeah,
Natasha
yeah,
Irons. Yeah,
yeah. I see. I'm getting, because in the comics it's his niece. In Superman and Lois, it's his daughter. So I'm a little confused. But I
yeah,
digress.
yeah.
Anyway, the point is, it was important to see them be overmatched, because if they've been able to come in and handle the situation, it just would have made this all for naught. You know what I mean? The whole point is that John's going to be the one. The Green Lanterns are going to be that are present have to be the ones that ultimately vanquish this threat. So it was important to see them be overpowered, but also notice it's not too much of a beatdown, because you don't want to diminish uh, Steel in the process.
Hmm.
And so it's just the right amount of, again, going back to wrestling terminology, it's just the right amount to put the heel over without damaging the baby face.
So what you're saying is they get to do their spots, they just don't get to go over.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah.
And see, right
Philip
now,
Kennedy Johnson, Philip
there are
Kennedy
people
Johnson
who
is
are
a
going to
better.
listen to this podcast and be like, "What are these crazy guys
They
talking
still
about?"
think we're talking about shoes when every time I mention heels, but yeah, no, Philip Kennedy Johnson is a better booker than Vince McMahon any day of the week, clearly by this book.
That's let's not go there either. That's another pod. That's definitely not a not safe for work
Yeah,
podcast.
no,
Um,
definitely not.
but this book ends with we learn a big part of Olgren's motivation here. He wants John Stewart as a vessel.
Mm,
And he even says that here, what better vessel could I have found than the John Stewart?
yeah,
Now, at the same time, remember we said that at the very beginning, Shepard is in conflict with the United Planets Lanterns, and he's overwhelmed, and we see that there are these United Planet Lanterns around him, and somebody shows up to say, "Oh well, I'll take him back." And guess who's pulling a fast one? Guy Gardner.
yeah. Who
And
knew?
so it looks like John's going to have some backup very soon. By the way, in this issue, I do want to mention too. There's a page or a couple of there's a page here honoring MD Doc Bright, who again he was an artist for Green Lantern, who
Yeah,
unfortunately passed away this year. and some really nice artwork here, and a little tribute to him. So, if you have a chance, read that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Uh, it's the reason for these tributes is often sad, but when they're done, they're very well produced, and so
Mm-hmm.
in that respect, it was a nice tribute. But I mean, it'd be better off if these people were still alive and not having to be tributed, obviously. But the tribute was well done.
Mm-hmm. So now we are on to issue number 11, Wrath of the Old Gods. And we're back to the scene that happened that John was in before with Olgren, and we see Ajna before she became the Revenant Queen. And we also see what Bila Vak looked like before, or possibly it's another version of Bila Vak. But we're getting more information here about how Ajna became to be. Ajna was actually, unfortunately, killed by Olgren, which caused the other gods to have to kill Olgren himself, and then they couldn't kill him all the way, so they broke him into pieces. And which kind of reminded me of I don't know if you ever saw The Strain. They didn't put this on the TV show, but it was in the novel that the master had to be broken into various pieces, and so that just reminded me of that. But anyway, that's what we're getting.
Point.
That's what we're getting here with Olgren back on Earth. So Star Shroud, aka Varen, who is now kind of overwhelming Ellie. If you look at these panels, and again, these are very horrific. The infection, by the way, it is spreading in Shirley Stewart, but the atmosphere around them is getting more and more chaotic, whereas Ellie had this very idyllic illusion around Shirley. Now she's being overwhelmed.
Right. I do like the name Star. What is it? Star Shroud.
Star Shroud. Yes,
that's a great name for a villain.
Mm-hmm. It really is. Yeah, I like the one panel because and people are going to say this is a weird association. He was kind of peering out from a crevice, and you could see kind of these little black dirty specks around him, and it reminded me of Pigpen from the Peanuts.
I can see that. Yeah.
That's what went through my head. But I want to say here, remember how I mentioned that panel just a few minutes ago? So we see as Star Shroud is chasing Ellie and Shirley Stewart, we see that she starts to think about really who she was and the life that she has lived. And we get to see in this series not just that she is, this old woman at the end of her life, that she was somebody who fought for civil rights. She's a woman who endured an abusive husband. She is somebody who wanted to make a better world for her son and daughter when she was alive. And interestingly enough, we see that this is very interesting. I didn't think this was the case. She knows that Ellie is not actually her daughter who died before. She realizes this is not real.
Well, I think maybe not at the beginning of the series, but I think at some point.
At some point, she started to.
She had moments of clarity where it's okay, I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what year it is. I know exactly how old I am. I know exactly
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a very true depiction of the disease that the character has, because with people who have dementia, there are moments of extreme clarity where they know exactly who everybody is, exactly where they are, exactly what's going on, and then the next minute, it's all back to for naught. But yeah, it was very interesting. I wasn't expecting that,
mm-hmm.
And so it was a surprise when it came in the book.
And so this is the point where Ellie decides that she's basically going to combine with Shirley Stewart.
Yeah, to perfect her.
And and she was like, guide me with your will. And when she when they make this kind of combination here, we get this look of like who Shirley Stewart was in
Yeah,
her younger life,
yeah,
and the look on her face makes you immediately know she is not going down without a fight.
yeah. You don't mess with that woman.
Exactly. This is a one, like I said, she's faced down racism, she's faced down abuse. She is not somebody who's going to turn and be a wilting flower.
That's when you're a kid and you do something you're not supposed to, and then she comes home and finds out, and you're up the creek. You know which creek I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's the same situation.
And I have to say this too, as John continues the battle here, my favorite image complete from this entire series is when John is doing this rebuilding here, when he's in the middle of this globe thing that he's rebuilding, this like massively intricate construct.
Yeah.
It is so beautiful. It's another thing I wish I could like have on a poster. It's gorgeous. If Phillip Kennedy Johnson ever has like if he ever has one of these at a con, I would love to have him sign this.
Yeah, no, it's the art was phenomenal throughout, from the first issue to the 12th one. Just um, just immaculate work.
And again, we go back to, as John was fighting this enemy, he says, but I'm not just a Green Lantern. I'm the Guardian and the Builder, and I just needed to see how it worked from the middle.
Mm.
And so we're starting to come to the conclusion here that John has been fighting this battle in a very specific way with his not only his powers, but the person that he is, like his natural inclinations, which, by the way, came from Shirley Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the foundation for the builder? When we think about John Stewart, we think about, especially, once we had the Marine part integrated into his character, which wasn't there, by the way, in his original incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
But people think, well, that's why he became a Green Lantern. No, the part of John Stewart that the foundation that built John Stewart was his mother. The values, the toughness that was instilled upon him, that was instilled in him by Shirley Stewart.
That's what makes him a great Green Lantern.
Exactly.
The other stuff just makes him a great tactician.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, right?
I'm a little confused. I will say this: I was a little confused because Shepard and Guy show up, and I thought, at this point, I'm like, isn't John still in this other universe? Did they come through somehow?
Yeah,
and maybe that's it. Maybe I just missed it. I don't know. Maybe I missed a sentence here or there. But they show up, and you see that now we have Shepard and.
He does say we got to get back to Earth fast.
Yeah.
Right, and then Guy says something.
But I thought they were in another universe entirely. Is what I'm saying.
I think they may have been, because then. Guy says something. How soon are you talking? Because it took us a while to get here, and he's like, "I'm talking about right now." And that's where they kind of, that's where John uses his powers, right? And again, he shows you how powerful John is at this point. That he could do that in an instant, or what seemed like an instant.
So the final story, it's just entitled The Builder. And again, we see that the conflict goes on here, and just some really gorgeous art here.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Bilavak dies early on in this issue. And so you've got to think, well, now the Dark Star is going to be completely out of control. Can't be beaten now, because that was the one thing holding it in check was the work of Bilavak.
Yeah.
Also, at the same time, we see the Star Shroud is in. Again, this is the narrative is cutting between where John is out in the universe, and at the same time, cutting back to Earth, where Shirley Stewart is now battling the Star Shroud.
And what I liked about that battle is you see the construct of the armor that that Shirley creates. It's like from the story she was telling
Yeah,
Ellie the time before, and again,
yeah,
it straddles that the mix of superhero genre with horror with medieval fantasy almost. And the fact that Montos is able to draw all of these things is
yeah,
insane to me.
yeah.
It's absolutely insane.
And interestingly enough, here, I actually didn't. I had to go back and read this a couple of times to like realize what happened. Now wearing the Dark Star ring, okay, and again, Olgren wanted to be the vessel for he wanted to have John Stewart be his vessel. Now that John Stewart has this, and Bylavac tells him you can't beat them, but you can command them. And so this massive John creates this like massive, monstrous, smoking hand and just kind of sucks everybody into it.
Mm.
And that pretty much ends the battle on that front.
Again, just the power is amazing. Like it's I mean, we're like that again. It just I think highlights the the uniqueness of the Green Lantern mythos is that you can have so many different characters. You can see they're so unique. They're all Green Lantern, but they're so unique from each other. You wouldn't get this kind of story from a Kyle Rayner tale or a Hal Jordan tale. Like this story, this power set is completely unique to John Stewart,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the benefit of the Green Lantern mythos having so many Earthbound Green Lanterns.
And I really like the dialogue here too. And this is Shirley speaking to Star Shroud. She
Mm.
says John was always so creative, but he's quick to scrap too. I may not have my boy's mind for building, but he got his love of punishing bullies from me. That's where John Stewart gets his sense of
Yeah,
justice. And
yeah,
isn't that integral for a Green Lantern? That's
absolutely.
where, yeah, it's kind of like, Steve Rogers saying, I don't like bullies. Well,
Yeah,
obviously, we see that's the case with John Stewart, too.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And again, I really think this whole story did a great job of showcasing John Stewart as the the soldier, uh, the architect,
Hmm.
and the superhero. Like it balanced
Yeah.
all those facets of the characters so very well and so very evenly. I thought.
And so this is not the last time John tangles with Varen. John shows up, and again, with the power that he had, he was able to transport himself and Shepard and Guy Gardner here like instantly. And when he shows up, he punches Varen through the back of the head, and looks like it's difficult exactly for me to say what happened here. It looks like once again Varen kind of evaporates.
That sort of looked like to me too. So
Yeah. And once again, he said, "Settle up with me anytime, but don't come after my mother." He's like, "How many times do I have to tell you, son?"
it reminded me of one of the few moments that I actually liked in Man of Steel, where Zod attacks Martha.
Yeah. Why'd you say that name?
Yeah, and then Superman shows up and flies him into that field and beats the crap out of him. And says,
And his line is, "You think, you think you can threaten my mother?" And
yeah,
at that
yeah,
at that point, he wasn't the last son of Krypton. He was a hacked off farm boy who did
yeah,
not like the fact that
yeah,
somebody was tangling with
yeah.
his
So
mother.
it was one of my personal few bright lights from Man of Steel.
Yeah.
But yeah, that reminded me of that for sure.
So John is able to heal Shirley of the infection, but remember, with the dementia, which also affects the immune system, she's still dying, and especially after this battle, and even as she separates from Ellie, she's still dying.
Mm.
But remember, as they have said throughout this entire issue, a Green Lantern can do anything. And we see John start to release this power. And even though she dies in the human sense, he sends her to the space between moments where we see like the blind prophet version of Kyle Rayner.
Yes.
So she's dead in a sense, but she's also able to manifest through his ring too. So she's almost kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. She's like his Force ghost now.
It's almost like he made it so that her consciousness could be his ring's AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's like and so for one thing, I love this ending because it is a happy ending, but it doesn't dilute the fact that she succumbed to dementia.
Yeah. And you know, it didn't undo that.
It would have bothered me if they had just said, you know what, he's a Green Lantern, he can do anything, he can cure dementia. Now, if you're going to give a character a real disease that has no known cure, then it is the person who is creating the work of fiction. I think it's their job to represent the subject matter authentically. And I think curing the dementia would have been not authentic. So I'm glad Phillip Kennedy Johnson didn't go down that route. But I also like the route that he did go down, because in the world we live in today, that would be the equivalent of somebody taking a voice recording of their loved one and inputting it into their, let's say, their Alexa device, you know, the AI of their cell phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can always hear that person's voice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's probably somewhere somebody has the technology to do that on that scale, like in terms of putting it into like an Alexa or something like that. So it's not out of the realm of, you know, plausibility, right? Like you can kind of relate it to that kind of thing. So overall, I was pleased with how he handled that.
And let me say this too. It also creates something in the future for John that could be devastating too. What happens when what happens when he loses his connection with this power?
Yeah.
What happens if some villain comes along and breaks this connection? How devastating will that be for John?
Yeah.
So Phillip Kennedy Johnson has set up something for, you know, whether it's him or some other future writer, something, you know, in John Stewart's future that could be devastating. And how is Ellie going to be? Is she always going to be somebody who's on John's side, or did we see the flashes of whether it's a villain or just somebody who goes off on her own and doesn't always agree with John?
You already predicted the heel turn for Ellie.
Well, that's what I kept wondering, like, throughout the series. I was like, at some point, could she be corrupted by, like, the Radiant Dead infection? Like, could enough of that energy come through somehow?
Yeah.
But we didn't see that. It seemed it was a happy ending with, you know, the quote unquote the construct sister, and again the Obi-Wan version of John's mother and John. So this did have a happy ending. So if you just want to read this like 12 issue series, I think you'll find it very satisfying at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought it was very satisfying, and I was more than happy with how it ended, in the sense that you know, dementia still is dementia, and it still unfortunately does its thing. But John and his family still managed to have some sort of a happy ending, and so that was immensely satisfying. I was very happy with the story, and I think Phillip Kennedy Johnson stuck the landing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Anything else?
So I love the art, and again, there were a couple of characters, or you know, some answers that were specifically Green Lantern lore that I would have liked to have seen come back into the story. But I don't have any really major criticisms of this because it was such it was an important development for John Stewart.
Yeah,
And to look at it, it is, again, it's very authentic. And I think for anyone who has, watched a loved one struggle, you can read this story. And even though obviously it has a happy ending that's fantastical and couldn't possibly happen, the emotions in this are very real. They're very authentic. And Philip Kennedy Johnson just did a magnificent job overall.
I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and again, this what I think is a success of this story overall is both the written word and the art balanced. You know, superheroics, high fantasy, and horror, all the while dealing with a very real world scenario and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And on those levels, the whole story, from writing to art, was an absolute success. So, unless there's anything for that, we can go ahead and rate it.
Yeah.
So remember, we do 5 for story and 5 for art. So what would you rank this, Donnie?
Well, I'm going to give the art a 5. I loved it all the way through, and the writing, I don't know, 4.5. Again, not very little to criticize. This was just magnificently done.
Yeah, again, I would agree with you. I think 4.5 for the writing and 5 for the art.
And again, we're talking about out of 5. In case anybody thinks we're
Yeah,
talking about like out of 10, we're
no,
saying that this is pretty
it's out
close
of
to
5.
perfect.
Yeah, yeah, it's out of 5. Yeah, it's out of 5. I think maybe the only thing that the reason why there's a 4.5 instead of a 5 is maybe from a more casual reader's perspective, it might have been so reliant on, you would have to have some knowledge of uh, from Kenny Johnson's Superman run
Mhm.
to understand certain things. Uh,
And
and
as I was like making my notes for this episode, I was like, how far do I go into this? And like, I didn't want to confuse anybody with what was going on here by like
yeah,
sidetracking and going too much into what happened before.
yeah.
So,
So it can get a little too, like I said, for not for me, because I had been reading Action Comics, so it wasn't a problem for me. But
yeah.
if I'm thinking about it from a general audience's perspective, who, for example, let's say hears about the John Stewart casting news, and then goes on the DC app or goes to the Kindle store or goes to their comic store, and because they want to get something John Stewart related, picks up this. It may get a little too. It may get a little confusing for him. It may be a little too deep for him off the start. Again, I like those kind of stories. For me, it's fine because I'm invested in these characters already, and I've read the Action Comic stuff, so it wasn't a problem for me. But if I'm thinking from an outside audience member's perspective, like a general audience person,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I would probably. That's why to justify deducting half a point. That's kind of how I did it, because otherwise, there's not really much to complain about this story. So. Uh, 9.5 out of 10. If we want to talk about it out of 10, it'd be a 9.5 out of 10. Uh, I don't think too many stories
I'd say
get
nine
that.
and three
Yeah,
quarter, nine and three quarters or
yeah,
something,
yeah,
just to irritate Adam.
yeah. Wow, you like to do that 3/4 nonsense. Uh, but but no, so yeah, it's a good grade, and I hope Phillip Kennedy Johnson and Montos know that we love their work here and appreciate what they brought to John Stewart and the Green Lantern mythos. And we hope that there's more John Stewart comic stories to come, no doubt.
Mhm.
And hopefully this wasn't Philip Kennedy Johnson's last foray into the ring slinging world. I
We
hope
we
he
know
comes
it's
back
not
one day.
specifically because he helped
Well, yeah, he
Jeremy Adams write
yeah.
Civil War. So,
I'm talking beyond that. I hope that
mhm.
at some point he comes back
Yeah,
and plays in this universe again
yeah.
down the road. But with that, we are all caught up on Green Lantern War Journal. And the next time you hear us, we'll be catching up on the Green Lantern title written by Jeremy Adams.
Mhm.
And but until then, you can talk Green Lantern with Donnie or I on social media. Donnie, where do they track you down?
You can find me on TikTok or Twitter or Facebook, and especially YouTube, where I do lots of Green Lantern product reviews. Let's talk collectibles. Let's talk DC Comics. Let's talk Green Lantern.
You can find me on Twitter at Adam_EastFan. You can find the podcast network on the Facebook group dedicated to it. Listed in the description below. Click that. I will add you, and we can continue the conversation there if you so choose. But remember, Green Lantern War Journal is forever. From the first time John tells his adversary to stay the hell away from his mother, to the last. So long, everybody.
So long, everyone.